What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Lights Out Podcast. I'm your host, Josh. As always, I've got my producer, Joel, here in the studio with me. Today, we are covering the abandoned Lake Shawnee Amusement Park. This place is supposed to be full of paranormal activity due to its dark history spanning back hundreds and hundreds of years. I mean, what's creepier than an abandoned amusement park?
I know, right?
It's interesting because I just started watching Freak Show on American Horror Story.
Oh, nice.
And so this place kind of gives me similar vibes to just kind of how some of the, the tents and rides looked at one point. And so this one's definitely a creepy one. I also wanted to update people on the paranormal activity in the studio because it seems to have ceased for the most part here in the studio. Well, actually, I take that back because on some of our other shows, there's actually been points where they have actually a soundboard where, it plays like little sounds. There's one that's like
the sound bites.
Yeah, there's like little sound bites loaded onto the board. And in one of their episodes recently, they had sounds going off without anybody touching the buttons, which, I mean, again, could just be a computer glitch. But it's interesting because the timing of it was so perfect. And the sound that kept playing over and over again at different points was boo.
Wow.
How interesting is that, right?
Ooh, that gives me chills.
I know. Yeah. So, and they didn't even hear it. One of the times they didn't even hear the sound during, the recording. It was in post that they were editing the episode and all of a sudden, boo, just comes up and just out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And nobody was even remotely close to the board.
Oh, that's so creepy.
So nobody could have pressed it.
And that still happens. Not exactly that, but when I'm editing, there's still some camera glitches and some weird stuff with the electronics.
That's true.
Not as frequent as I've seen in the past.
Yeah.
So
as far as like what we've experienced on this show, it's been pretty minimal lately, which is good. But it seems as if whatever was happening in here maybe has moved inside of my house.
Yes.
Because we record in basically a garage I built in my backyard, and now inside my house we've been having some slight paranormal happenings.
Oh yeah.
So recently I was out of town. Joel was staying at my house, and he had a very, honestly, bone-chilling experience.
So I had a few experiences this time. So one of the times, I was just walking back through the front door after letting the dogs out. And while I was passing your dining room on the left side, it was already dark inside. There was no lights on. And I just remember walking through, and just in my peripherals on my left side, I noticed quite a large black shadow just kind of standing there very, still. And it just really sticked out to me because normally I would think there's something there, but when I looked over there, it was like the shadow was gone. So it seemed that whatever was there just disappeared once it noticed I was looking at it. And then another time, I woke up in the morning and...
Was this the next day or a few days later?
The following day. So
oh, wow.
Saw the apparition maybe second day in, third day in, woke up that morning, and my girlfriend actually spotted some claw marks on my back and my left side. And we'll put some pictures up so you guys can see, but clearly it looked like 3 nail marks going down my back on 2 places, and there was some bruising. And what was strange about it was when I touched it, it didn't hurt or anything. But it was definitely there. So I asked Josh, I was like, hey, have you ever woken up to some claw marks? Like, is it your dog's? Is it? And, obviously it wasn't. So that was just very spooky that I woke up with some claw marks. And, my girlfriend couldn't acknowledge anything that happened that
it wasn't like she scratched
it wasn't like she scratched me.
If you got scratched the way that these marks looked, you would have woken up 100%. Right. And so to not wake up and just the next day
they're there,
you notice them. That's very weird.
Yeah. And then one more creepy thing was one night when I was getting out of the hot tub, I was walking back upstairs and I just heard some country music playing, and I was looking around. I was like, where the hell is this country music coming from? And it was coming from the garage. Like this, the radio just turned on in the garage, and I opened the garage and it's just pitch black. And that was just like the creepiest moment for me when I walk into the pitch black garage and I just hear some country music.
That's interesting.
And I saw your speaker up on the fridge or something.
Yeah. I was going to say I have a speaker in there, but that's weird that it would just come on
by
like
itself. and I think it was a Sonos speaker, and I wasn't even
they're not even connected to each other. That's really interesting because like the Sonos speaker system, if you've ever used one of those before, you can like link them all up. And so whatever you play, like I have a portable one that I think you took outside for a while you're in the hot tub. That's really weird that it just started. And were you listening to country music outside?
I don't have country music on my playlist. So, like I like country music, but it's not something I'm gonna listen to all the time. So
that's really weird.
That really frightens me. So
I mean, there's been so many times where TVs in my house just turn on randomly, and they're not like voice act. I don't have Siri, I don't have Alexa, I don't have any of that shit, and they would just come on randomly and just start playing some random show or channel, and then like I would come back later on and they'd just be off, and I'd be like, what the fuck? Like, is that just some timer or something? But then the apparition in my dining room is really interesting to me because there was one night where it was like really late. I think it was like 2 a.m. or something like that, and my wife had already gone to sleep. My dogs were already asleep in the bed, and I happened to get up because I heard this like knocking, like persistent knocking coming from the front of my house. And I was like, what the fuck? But what was weird about it is I was the only one that heard it. My dogs didn't hear it because they go off if they hear anybody hit the door, any knock or anything. They'll go off, but they were dead asleep. So I like kind of rush out to that area of the house, and I'm expecting to like see, I'm like, we have some crazy neighbors, or like, you know, maybe it's some kid playing a prank or something. And I went out the front door and there's absolutely nobody there. But it was like banging on my window, and it was right where the dining room saw the apparition, which is creepy as fuck. So creepy.
And you also have the Ring doorbells and motion detection on your front door, so you would have got the notification on your phone like, hey, someone's at my front door.
Very true. Nothing.
So it went under the radar to the cameras and to your dogs. So
that's my life. So I don't know if I'm dealing with a poltergeist or what, but I honestly I think, you know, I don't necessarily believe it's something demonic or something evil that is here, or I think it could be something ancestral. I think it could even be, you know, some people say that even like spirit guides can do stuff like that to get your attention, or an ancestral spirit, so a loved one that's passed maybe is trying to get your attention for some reason. And I mean, it's very easy to be like, oh my God, claw marks on you. It's like, you know, watch out. You've got demonic activity happening. But I personally never feel anything like evil. I never feel like something's watching me or like is out to hurt me.
Same.
I think that there's either a spirit guide or something like that that's trying to communicate, or it's a past loved one that
maybe passed away in the house.
Especially my wife, because she's lost her grandparents in the last year, and we have, you know, some mementos and things like that from their house and from, you know, shirts and clothing and stuff. So it's very possible that something around that is causing some of the activity.
Absolutely, because you had those mementos before you moved into this house, like a long time ago, in one of your apartments. You experienced some paranormal activity because you had
similar type of thing where it was a shadowy figure kind of standing in the corner, and even my pets noticed it, which was interesting. And
pets, yes, that too was just laying in bed. The dogs will start looking over in the corner and there's no one there, and they're just locked eyes on something. Yeah, man, I really think there is something going on here on this property.
I think there is.
And you guys even saged the place before you moved in. So you guys already done.
I mean, we do that pretty consistently. We're always burning incense. We've got so many crystals that it blows people's minds sometimes how many crystals we have lying around. So, and I personally think we have pretty good vibes around here, and everybody's pretty happy. All of our animals are happy. So I don't know. I think something unexplained is happening, and you know, I just hope it's not something evil, you know. And I don't think it is. I think it's something that's just trying to communicate or trying to get our attention. So I don't know. It's funny. I was joking around with my wife and, you know, her co-host, and we're talking about how maybe we should get the Ouija board out and see what we can communicate with. And they're like, absolutely not. Don't ever bring that in here. Because again, I mean, those are, as we know, with Veronica and some of the other horror stories out there, if you don't know what you're doing with the Ouija board, it can go very, very bad. So
very true.
Probably not a good idea to do that. But yeah, just wanted to share some of that paranormal activity happening here at the home front. Because when you told me about the scratch, I was like, damn, that's crazy. Because my wife Kendall has had that not in the house, but at that apartment we were talking about that we used to live in. She did wake up one morning with scratch marks kind of in between her chest there, and it was exactly the same type of scratch marks.
Wow.
And if you just look up like spirit scratching,
Yeah.
it's these red marks, but then they go away like pretty quickly.
Yeah, mine's gone now.
So that's really crazy though.
Yeah.
I know. God, do we need to do a paranormal investigation on my own house? I know. I always say that. I'm like, maybe I fucking should. Maybe I should set up like some motion cameras and like.
But that's the thing is like, when I stayed here the whole week, it was like inconsistent but consistent. You know, it's not like stuff's happening all the time where I can have the cameras ready. It's like when it happens, it's already over by the time I have my phone up and you know.
So fat. That's the thing about it. It's capturing paranormal activity is the hardest fucking thing to do. And I think shows like Ghost Adventures and Ghost Hunters, they make it look easy.
They do.
Because I mean, they have so much equipment and that's all they're doing all day. But you know, in real life, like it's very hard to catch shit like that because it's like there and gone in a split matter of seconds. You don't have time to even really react to it other than like, holy shit, is that what I just heard? Is that what I just saw? So
I'm like, makes you question your reality a little bit.
It really does. So that's the paranormal activity that's happening at my house. But let's get into the paranormal activity and the very dark history of the Lake Shawnee Abandoned Amusement Park. Also, this episode of Lights Out Podcast is brought to you by Babbel, HelloFresh, and Care of. So the Lake Shawnee Amusement Park opened in 1926 in Rock, West Virginia, which is just outside of Princeton, and operated for about 40 years. The property where the park was built, though, has a very dark history that dates back hundreds of years. In 1774, the land was granted to a man named Mitchell Clay for his service in the French and Indian War. Mitchell was born in Virginia around 1734, and he married Phoebe Belcher in 1760, and the two of them eventually had 16 children together. The family moved onto the land in 1775. At the time, they had 12 children. Mitchell established a farm on the 803-acre plot of land, which included property on either side of the Bluestone River. There, they built a cabin for their whole family, and they also had a field for livestock to graze, a tobacco field, and a wheat field, along with an orchard and a small garden to grow their own produce, and they called the estate Clover Bottom. The Clay family were the first white settlers in what is now Mercer County, West Virginia, and for a while everything was fine. But then there was a problem. The white settlers had a hostile history with the local Shawnee Native American tribe, and those tensions eventually boiled over. Not much is known about how the Shawnee came to the area initially. By 1600, there were at least 10,000 tribesmen settled all along the Ohio River Valley. They had shared history with several other tribes, and these groups got along well and lived harmoniously. Leaders of the Shawnee tribe inherited their titles and held the position for life. The larger group was divided into separate clans, and the area where the principal chief lived was called the Chillicothe, and the Chillicothe functioned like the capital city of the tribe. The Shawnee also had war chiefs, which were chosen based on skill and experience, not heredity. Around the year 1630, the Iroquois Confederacy, which was a group of tribes who came from the northeast, started attacking the Shawnee village, driving them further south, away from the Ohio River Valley. And instead of settling on the abandoned land, the Iroquois used it for a hunting ground. The first treaty between the Shawnee and European settlers was in 1682. Many of the customs of the Shawnee clashed with the traditional European values. For example, the tribe's council included both men and women, and when the Quakers questioned why they would allow women to make crucial decisions for the group, a tribesman replied that some women were wiser than men. And ain't that the truth? Decades went by, and the Quakers continued settling and building on the land, as tensions between them and the tribesmen rose. By about 1730, Iroquois tribes had gotten weaker, and the Shawnee started to return to the land that they'd been driven away from 100 years earlier. Some of them settled in the area. That includes modern-day Princeton in southern West Virginia. And by now, the French and the British had a stronghold in the area, including trading posts and military forces. Both wanted to make the Shawnee their allies, and for a few decades, the Shawnee sometimes sided with the French, and sometimes with the British in multiple conflicts. In 1758, they agreed to a treaty with the British, along with several other tribes. The Native Americans were promised limited colonial settlements to the west and guaranteed access to hunting grounds around the Ohio River Valley. But rebellious colonists continued to push the boundaries of those borders and settle in areas that went against the treaty's terms. In 1768, 10 years after signing the treaty, the British claim areas in West Virginia and Kentucky, officially breaking the treaty and moving onto Native American lands in response to the land that they were promised being invaded. The Shawnee started attacking settlers. During the Revolutionary War, most of the Shawnee sided with the British Crown, fighting against the colonists, as they believed that this was their best chance of saving their land. The Shawnee were a peaceful tribe who preferred to stay out of conflicts, but when necessary, they were fierce warriors who triumphed in battle. A white settler named Mary Jemison was adopted by a tribe in the late 1750s when she was just 15 years old. According to her accounts, they were capable of unspeakable violence toward their enemies. As they traveled, Mary saw a tribesman string scalps, human scalps, of their enemies on a pole and then carry them over his shoulder. When they arrived at the village, Mary saw the bodies of white settlers chopped to pieces. Heads, arms, legs, and other body parts were hung on poles and roasted over a fire until the skin was black. She was shocked and horrified by the blood and gore. But though the Shawnee didn't hesitate to violently attack and kill enemies, they treated Mary well. When her adopted brother offered to free her after the Revolutionary War, she said no and chose to stay with her tribe. By then, she had kids of her own and considered the Shawnee to be her family. So her brother gave her a plot of land that she could leave to her children, which was a demonstration of the generosity and the empathy the Shawnee could exhibit. Now, circling back to Mitchell Clay and his family, as they were about to learn what the Shawnee did to those they considered to be enemies. Just 1 month before the end of the Revolutionary War, in August 1783, Mitchell had harvested the grain crop. Fences had been built around the crop to keep it safe from wandering livestock. And Mitchell asked his two oldest sons, 18-year-old Bartley and 16-year-old Ezekiel, to finish securing the grain. After that, they left for a hunting trip. And he was hunting for game to preserve in the family's larder, which was a storage area where raw meat could be preserved for the winter. And while their father was away, his older children did chores around the farm. Bartley and Ezekiel worked on building the fence to secure the stacks of grain while their oldest sibling, 20-year-old Tabitha, was at the river washing with some of her sisters. Phoebe was back at the family's cabin, watching over her youngest children. And they had no idea that 11 members of the Shawnee tribe were slowly closing in, ready to attack. And seemingly out of nowhere, Bartley was shot and fell to the ground. Tabitha heard the shot from the river, and when she ran over, a tribesman was standing over Bartley with a hunting knife. Before Bartley could be scalped, Tabitha lunged at the tribesman and attempted to wrestle the knife away from him. She was unarmed and outnumbered, but she fought as hard as she could to try to save her brother. She put up a good fight, but in the end, the tribesman stabbed her multiple times with the hunting knife and then cut her body into multiple pieces. The younger Clay sisters had to run to the cabin to tell their mother what was happening. A man named Ligon Blankenship was visiting the Clay family's farm when the attack started and was actually with Phoebe when the young girls ran up to her, screaming. Phoebe begged Ligon to go and save her children from the Shawnee, but in an incredible act of cowardice, he fled the property instead. He told the other settlers in the area that the entire Clay family had been massacred, assuming the Shawnee would eventually get to the cabin and kill them all. Tabitha and Bartley were dead, but the Shawnee didn't kill anyone else. They scalped them both and captured Ezekiel before leaving the farm. Phoebe made sure they were all gone before she went outside. She then gathered the mutilated bodies of her children and brought them back to the cabin and put them on a bed. She rounded up the younger kids and went to the nearest neighbor's house, which was about 6 miles away, to wait for her husband to return. She didn't know that Mitchell was already on his way back from the hunting trip, and the night before he had actually had a terrifying nightmare of a tribe massacring his entire family. And this dream felt so real that he felt no choice but to go home immediately. When he arrived at Clover Bottom, he saw pools of blood around the unfinished fence, and then he just took off towards the cabin. When he saw what was left of Bartley and Tabitha in the bed, he thought his nightmare had come true and just assumed that his entire family was dead. He went after the tribe on horseback, intending to fight to the death if he had to, as at this point he had nothing left to lose. But when he caught up with the Shawnee, they didn't kill him. They stole his horse and then continued on their way. Meanwhile, a group of settlers had come together to help the Clay family bury Bartley and Tabitha. The adult men then went off to hunt down the tribe and get Ezekiel back. 11-year-old Mitchell Jr. and 9-year-old Charles joined the men to avenge their murdered siblings and save their older brother. That night, they caught up to the Shawnee traveling on horseback, as they had stopped and set up camp. The settlers made a plan to attack at dawn. The next morning, the first tribesman to wake up and wander away from the camp was immediately shot dead, and that's when the battle began, and multiple tribesmen were killed. Charles followed an injured man up a hill. He begged for his life, but Charles brutally murdered him anyway. A chilling detail since he wasn't even 10 years old. Unfortunately, the Shawnee had separated into multiple groups, and the group that had Ezekiel escaped. The settlers were able to track the second group back to their capital city, but it was too late. The tribe had already learned about the Shawnee massacre, and minutes before the settlers arrived, Ezekiel was ceremoniously burned at the stake, which obviously when they found this out, the settlers were just extremely pissed and enraged. And instead of burying the Shawnee killed in the battle, they stripped off their skin and used it to make razor straps to polish their blades. And these straps were kept in the men's families for generations. These violent events that took place are referred to collectively as the Clover Bottom Massacre. Mitchell and Phoebe were devastated by the deaths of their children, and they left Clover Bottom and moved to another farm and never returned. The land stayed in the Clay family, and it was eventually bought by Mitchell's son-in-law, George Pierce, who married his second oldest daughter, Rebecca. Not much is known about the Clay property until the 1920s when it was purchased by entrepreneur Conley Snidow. Conley thought this was the perfect place to build an elaborate amusement park, which I'm assuming probably doesn't know too much about that massacre when he did this. His crew first broke ground in the middle of a grassy field to build the circular swing ride. Then they erected a Ferris wheel, which was one of the star attractions of the park, an architectural marvel. The people of the time were still awestruck by a giant wheel that carried people high into the sky in rocking bucket seats. The park also had fantastic water features. There was a cement swimming pool called the Cement Pond with 2 water slides, multiple diving boards, and a bathhouse. And visitors could rent old-fashioned wool bathing suits for 10 or 15 cents. That sounds super comfortable. Can you imagine swimming in a wool bathing suit?
That'd be rubbing your skin so bad.
Talk about chafing. Jesus Christ. There was also a larger pond where guests could take canoe and paddle boat rides. Conley included plenty of entertainment for adult visitors, including Wild West shows, a racetrack, a dance hall, and even a speakeasy. Prohibition wouldn't end in the United States until 1933, and the amusement park speakeasy became a popular spot in southern West Virginia. Mercer County had a large population of coal miners and their families, and Conley created the perfect place for these families, to just kick back, have some fun, and enjoy themselves after a hard day's work or a week of work. He even included cabins on the property where guests could stay overnight. The Lake Shawnee Amusement Park officially opened in 1926 and attracted visitors from all over the country. And for a while, everything was great. Guests were happy. Conley was making a nice profit from his investment. Building the amusement park was turning out to be one of the most profitable business ventures. On weekends in the summer, especially during the 4th of July weekend, over 10,000 visitors regularly came to the park. But eventually, as with most amusement parks, especially ones back in the day, tragedy struck. On May 31st, 1957, 8-year-old Brent Ladas Tabor was riding his bike on the road around the park when he was struck by a drunk driver and killed. Guests assumed that this was nothing more than a freak accident and continued to enjoy the amusement park, one of the only sources for family entertainment in the area. But unfortunately, the deaths kept coming. On June 4th, 1961, Juanita Harmon brought her 5 children to Lake Shawnee to go swimming. The pool was crowded that day and there were 2 lifeguards on duty, so Juanita felt sure that the afternoon of swimming was perfectly safe for her family. Her 6-year-old son, Wayne, had taken swimming lessons the year before, and he was an excellent swimmer, but no one noticed when he slipped under the water in the deep end of the pool and didn't come up. Another kid in the deep section kicked something under the water and then started screaming out to the lifeguards. What the hell are these lifeguards doing? That's like lifeguard 101 is watch the deep end for kids swimming over there. So Juanita was horrified when she realized this kid was talking about her son, and she had to watch a lifeguard pull Wayne's lifeless body from the water. They immediately started mouth-to-mouth resuscitation to try to get him breathing again, but he was unresponsive. When the ambulance arrived, emergency responders used a resuscitator in order to force oxygen into his lungs to hopefully save him. They then continued to try and revive Wayne on the way to the hospital, but he was pronounced dead on arrival. Over the 4th of July weekend in 1966, a local boy named John Taylor was swimming at Lake Shawnee. He had just celebrated his 12th birthday on July 2nd. John was a shy, quiet kid, but he was looking forward to starting 7th grade at Princeton Junior High School that fall. While he was out swimming, he got his arm stuck in the drain pipe under the water and couldn't move. A little while later, his mother, Catherine, came to the park to pick him up, but she couldn't find him anywhere. And as she walked around the pool, she saw something floating under the water. It was her son, John. After his arm got stuck, he couldn't come up for air or scream for help and drowned. By the time Catherine found him, he'd been dead so long, any hope of reviving him was long gone. So after the second drowning happened, hopefully all the lifeguards were literally fired and maybe hire a few more. But nope, that was it. The pool was closed down and filled with sand. But this didn't stop the park from escaping other tragic deaths. Later that year, a young girl was on the circular swings while the driver of a truck delivering soda to the park was trying to maneuver nearby. She was about 10 years old and wore a pink dress with ruffles. The driver was backing up near the ride and slammed into the swing she was sitting on, which crushed her. Witnesses remember the ground below the swings and the girl's body being covered in blood. She died before an ambulance arrived. By 1967, over 40 years after the park opened, a total of 6 people had died there. And that year, the health department inspected the land and ordered it to be immediately closed, as there were serious sewage problems, and the water was contaminated. The rides were all shut down, some were sold off, but everything else on the property sat abandoned for almost 20 years. But then in 1985, a businessman named Gaylord White bought the land and the remnants of the abandoned amusement park. He had worked there actually in his younger days and dreamed of reopening the park. He also thought that the property would be perfect for a housing development. By 1987, he made his dream a reality, and he tracked down the original circular swing ride in New Jersey and brought it back to the park. He also brought in a vintage Ferris wheel, paddle boats, and bumper boats, and he built a stage for live music. The park then celebrated its reopening over the 4th of July weekend in 1987. Almost 10,000 people flocked to the park, paying just $1 admission, going on the rides and watching live bands that performed all day and night. But it was short-lived. There weren't enough visitors to keep the park open. Those that did come reported strange things, like seeing visions or apparitions of ghostly children running through the park and hearing voices. Almost everyone who visited the park felt a heavy presence all around them. Gaylord even experienced these things himself. One day he heard chanting coming from a wooded area. It sounded like dozens of people were participating in a Native American chant, and when he went to check it out, there was no one there. Another day he was on his tractor just mowing the field when he felt an invisible force pushing down on his shoulders. And when he looked toward the swing ride, no one was there. But then he saw a little girl sitting in one of the swings. She just appeared out of nowhere and was wearing a pink ruffled dress. Next thing he knew, she was sitting on the tractor with him, and he realized the pressure on his shoulders was her trying to push him off the tractor. He then climbed down and offered it to the little girl, but then she vanished. He left the tractor in that exact spot for months, and when he tried to start it again, he discovered a fuel leak, which could have caused an explosion or fire if he had kept using it. So maybe the little girl tried to save his life, or tried to sabotage the tractor to kill him. Gaylord tried to keep the park open, but with significant increase in insurance rates, he just couldn't afford it. In 1988, he shut down the rides and started his next venture, hosting fishing tournaments and other activities on the property to bring in paying customers. He also had plans for a future housing development, but before that was put in place, something shocking happened. In the early 90s, Gaylord hired a crew to convert a piece of the property into a track for mud bogging, which is a type of racing where vehicles compete by driving through a pit of mud. After the crew broke ground, they made a gruesome discovery: human remains. including several skulls, were buried there. They had actually stumbled upon an ancient burial ground, a mass grave of children that had been there for hundreds of years. Archaeologists from Marshall University and Concord College spent years on the site to complete 2 excavations. They recovered thousands of Native American artifacts and countless bones. Altogether, there were over 25,000 artifacts, including jewelry, pottery, and a variety of tools. Based on the artifacts found, there were 2 separate Shawnee villages on the property when they were buried there. They found over a dozen complete skeletons of primarily young children before they stopped digging, and one of the bodies was a 14-year-old girl and an infant, and it looked like she had died while giving birth. They decided not to disturb the gravesite any further and believe there may be up to 3,000 children buried on the property. And these skeletons most likely date back to 1282, when thousands of Shawnee children died from some type of infection or disease that caused deterioration of their bones and teeth. After this discovery, historians theorize that it may be what prompted the Shawnee to attack the Clay family, as the Clay family had unknowingly settled on sacred land. So you can probably see how this place would be extremely haunted based on this history of Lake Shawnee. Before we get into the hauntings part of it and some of the most terrifying experience that people have had at this abandoned amusement park, we're going to take a quick ad break and we'll be right back. For most of us, learning a second language in high school or college wasn't exactly a high point in our academic careers. I took Spanish 1 and 2 in high school, and I kicked myself every day for not taking it more seriously. I mean, at the time, you're just like, when you're in high school, you're like, I want to do bare minimum just to graduate, get out of here. So Spanish was never a huge priority for me. But now, thanks to Babbel, the #1 selling language learning app, there's an addictively fun and easy way to learn a new language. Whether you'll be traveling abroad, connecting in a deeper way with family, or you just have some free time, Babbel teaches bite-sized language lessons that you'll actually use in the real world. I chose to do Spanish on Babbel, and it actually came in handy when I recently went to Mexico, because it was very nice to be able to communicate on a very basic level. Obviously, I wasn't like having full-on conversations, but to be able to like say things, that are relatively simple, like talking about food or drink or bathroom or things like that, it's super convenient to know how to ask for those things because not everybody knows English or understands English, so it's great to have had those tools in my pocket when I went. And what's great about Babbel is they give you 15-minute lessons, which make it perfect for you to learn a new language on the go, because literally you can do it on your phone, on the toilet if you want, or, at work or anywhere else you have a few minutes. Babbel designs their courses with practical real-world conversations in mind, things you'll get to use in everyday life. Other language learning apps use AI for their lesson plans, but Babbel lessons were created by over 100 language experts. Their teaching method has been scientifically proven to be effective, and with Babbel you can choose from 14 different languages, including Spanish, French, Italian, and German. Plus, Babbel's speech recognition technology helps you to improve your pronunciation and accent. So start your new language learning journey today with Babbel. And right now, when you purchase a 3-month Babbel subscription, you'll get an additional 3 months for free. That's 6 months for the price of 3. Just go to Babbel.com and use promo code LIGHTSOUT. That's BABBEL.com, code LIGHTSOUT for an extra 3 months free. Babbel is language for life. Another thing that I absolutely love to do is eat. And I've actually started learning how to cook a little bit more. And what's made it super easy is HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit in America, because HelloFresh, they've got such a wide variety of different meals, but best of all, they take the guessing out of cooking because they give you a really clear instruction card that's only got a few steps to follow that will, in return, give you a delicious home-cooked meal in like 30 minutes. What I like best about HelloFresh is that they send you all the ingredients you need pre-portioned out so that you never have to waste anything, which I absolutely love. Whenever I make meals from the grocery store on my own, I end up making way too much food and end up wasting a bunch of it. But with HelloFresh, not only are they saving me time to go to the grocery store, but money as well. Because in fact, HelloFresh is actually 28% cheaper than shopping at your local grocery store and 72% cheaper than a restaurant meal without sacrificing the quality. And I got to say, the quality that I've gotten in HelloFresh has always been top notch. I've never had a bad piece of food come through HelloFresh box ever. Best of all, HelloFresh offers the flexibility you need to easily customize your order on the app within minutes, and you can easily change your delivery day, food preferences, plan size, or just skip a week whenever you want to. So if you haven't tried HelloFresh yet, I don't know what you're doing. Make delicious food, learn how to cook, and eat really good in 30 minutes or less. Just go to HelloFresh.com/lightsout12 and use code lightsout12 for 12 free meals, including free shipping. Again, go to HelloFresh.com/lightsout12. And if you use lightsout12, you'll get 12 free meals plus free shipping. And our last sponsor for today is Care Of. I absolutely love Care Of. I've been using them, for probably about a year now. And when I first, started with Care Of, I knew nothing about vitamins or supplements or what do I need to take and when. Well, Care Of made it extremely easy to figure out what my body needs. Through their online quiz, they ask you a series of questions about your diet, lifestyle, and health concerns to help address your specific goals. It's literally like getting a one-on-one consultation with a nutritionist without leaving your house. And then they give you expert recommendations based on your answers. And what's great about it is you can pick and choose what you want. Maybe you already have a bunch of fish oil, so you don't necessarily need it. So you can really fine tune your pack of vitamins and supplements to exactly what you need. And what I love most about it is the fact that they send you all of your vitamins in these little packs with your name on it, which are so cute, in this cute little box that sits on top of my dresser. And every night before I go to bed, I just grab one of the packs, rip it open, take the vitamins, and that's it. You literally don't have to think about it at all. You don't have to keep track of like 5 different vitamin bottles and fill up a little pill organizer. They make it super, super easy to stay healthy and, take your vitamins. Care Of makes it easy with a personalized subscription delivered to your door each month, contact free, so you never have to worry about running out. And studies show it can take about 30 days for you to see the benefits of a new supplement routine. So consistency is key. And I 100% agree with that statement because it took me some time for, to really start seeing the results of it. But I got to say, I will not go back from using Care Of. And right now you can get 50% off your first Care Of order if you go to takecareof.com and enter code lightsout50. Again, you get 50% off your first Care Of order. Why not give it a try? Go to takecareof.com and enter code lightsout50 today. All right. Let's get into some of the hauntings of the Lake Shawnee Abandoned Amusement Park, which was actually named one of the most terrifying places in America by the Travel Channel, and it's no wonder with such a tragic and violent history. Many people believe that it's actually one of the most haunted places in the world, and it seems that the bloodshed and trauma experienced on the property may have permanently been embedded into the land. Others are sure that the people who lost their lives there never left, and that the land has been cursed since Mitchell Clay first broke ground in 1774 and disturbed the ancient burial ground. In the late 90s, after the archaeologists finished their work, Gaylord White and his wife Jewel, along with their son Gaylord Jr., started hosting tours of the property, as they wanted to share its rich history and the paranormal activity they had experienced. The rides are all still there, but everything is rusted and overgrown with trees and tall grass. Paranormal experts, ghost hunters, and just YouTubers have taken an interest in the property. They have traveled from across the country to come and experience and document the strange phenomena that happens at the park. People often feel like they're in the presence of children's spirits, especially around the areas where children have died. One of the YouTubers that's actually been to the park and done a pretty good job at documenting some of the paranormal activity and just some of her experience has been Chris Starr. So I'm going to play a little clip of her experience at the park.
Guys, this is it. I definitely feel like there is a child spirit here. Oh, this is wild. This is freaking wild.
Apparently, the spirit of a young boy often greets visitors at the park's entrance. And based on the description, this is most likely 12-year-old John Taylor, who drowned in the pool in 1966. Visitors have heard voices when no one is around, footsteps falling behind them, and the eerie sound of children giggling. It's common to hear the voices of children running around the abandoned park structures, and some have even heard the distinct sound of Native American chants. God, I don't know which one's more creepy, hearing children running around in the pitch dark when there's clearly no children there, or hearing Native American chanting.
Honestly, for me, chanting, because that's a whole like ritual they're doing right there.
Yeah.
They could be summoning like something on you or something. So
yeah, I'd have to agree with you. I think the children would be a little less scary, even though giggling children in the pitch dark is not.
Yeah, that is
not an
creepy.
enjoyable experience. But I agree with you. I think hearing chanting would definitely freak me out more.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, it's a little bit more sinister and serious tone to it versus,
because like children most of the time aren't going to be a threat. So hearing some giggling, unless they were like Chucky, have a knife or something, but in reality, an entity isn't going to have that.
Right.
But yes, something chanting.
Something about chanting, like, and like a drum beating, like slow, like, oh my God, what's about to happen?
Right.
Yeah, that's wild. But there's also a particular swing that often moves on its own, as if the spirit of a child is waiting for the ride to start up again. It twists and turns when the air is still and no one is around. And it's more active after dark. Some have even seen a vision of a young girl sitting on the swing, the same girl who was killed there in 1966. Visitors like to leave gifts for her, like dolls and stuffed animals. Even if someone has no idea which of the swings she died on, they are all still drawn to it and can feel a presence there. The air around the swing is always cold no matter what the temperature is outside, and the middle of the seat is always warm, as if someone had just been sitting on it. Sometimes a little girl wanders the property wearing her ruffled pink dress covered in blood. Other objects on the property can move on their own, even if no one is touching them, and there's no wind. When an object moves, it's often followed immediately by whispers or giggles. When the Discovery Channel TV crew visited the property, a crew member stepped into the dilapidated ticket box and got trapped inside. She wasn't able to open the door no matter how hard she pushed and pulled, even though the door had no locks on it.
So it was like it was nailed shut.
Yeah, while she was inside.
Good God.
And she was so panicked by the time she was rescued, she had to be taken to the hospital for treatment, assuming from shock and just panic attack. In addition to remnants of the amusement park, other items have been abandoned on the property. This isn't creepy at all. There are multiple school buses and cars, including a wooden coffin that just sit there. Literally just a coffin laying on the ground wide open, like as if something was in it and broke out of
resurrected.
It or something. Jesus Christ. Oh my God. The old abandoned buses are also known for paranormal activity. Visitors have reported getting a bad feeling when stepping close to one of them. And this feeling can be so intense that people have refused to even step inside the vehicle. When one group brought their dogs to the site, they hesitated as they were led inside one of these buses, and they could see the hair on the dogs' backs was just sticking straight up, which is a common sign of fear in dogs. The activity around the buses picks up significantly after dark, and some people have gotten such bad vibes that they physically can't step any closer. A haunted house was added to the property to entertain visitors, and one of the tunnels inside the house leads directly into one of these abandoned school buses. The haunted house is filled with toys and stuffed animals for the ghosts of children, which just makes it even creepier. And it's strange to walk through a haunted house in a place that's really haunted. Even seasoned ghost hunters can get freaked out. When a Boy Scout troop visited the property, one of the scouts was sitting behind the wheel of a bus, and his friend snapped a picture through the front window. And when they looked at the picture, a man or a boy was standing right behind him, even though he was alone inside the bus. The Ferris wheel no longer operates, but visitors have seen ghostly figures standing up in the buckets and a mysterious dark mass moving overhead. As people walk around the property, they may feel someone tugging on their clothes or touching their arm. And when they turn around, no one's there. When people take pictures, especially at night, they often capture light anomalies. Other times, cameras and other electronic equipment malfunction, or the batteries just die without warning. So no pictures or video can be taken at all. One visitor accidentally used the camera feature that detects faces, and when he examined the photo later, he saw that he had captured what looked like a person's face on the Ferris wheel. It's hard to take a picture at the park that doesn't include floating orbs. Paranormal experts believe orbs captured on film are spirits at just a low frequency, or even one that has negative energy. The most common experiences of people who visit the park are associated with lower frequencies, which are caused by trauma and emotional pain that attach to a certain area or object. This can manifest as physical sensations like sudden pressure, which was what Gaylord White felt on his shoulders while on his tractor. It can also feel like a prickly sensation on the skin or an abrupt temperature change, and people who are affected by the presence of spirits may even feel unexplained dizziness, nausea, anxiety, or stress. A person may even take on the emotions of the spirit and experience an unbearable sadness, anger, fear, or hopelessness that lingers until they leave the property. And even then, it can continue for hours or days. Taking on the emotion of a spirit without warning or explanation can be very overwhelming to some people. It can feel like the spirit is inhabiting their body, which can actually lead to symptoms of PTSD. But after nearly 50 years of marriage, Gaylord White died in 2010. His wife Jewel continued to care for the park with their oldest son, Gaylord Jr. 4 years later, though, Gaylord Jr. died suddenly at just 52 years old. Jewel wasn't sure what to do and asked one of her younger sons, Chris White, for help, and he agreed to take over the property and started making changes to the tours. Jewel worried that her deceased husband and son would be unhappy, as Chris was implementing policies and activities that they had nixed when they were alive. She believed their spirits were still in the park, and she could often feel their presence. She felt her husband most strongly around the Ferris wheel, which was his favorite pet project. She could also feel Gaylord Jr.'s presence inside the abandoned school bus where he often stayed. And late one night, a security camera aimed at the Ferris wheel caught a sudden movement, as one of the safety bars unfastened on its own. And when Jewel watched the footage, she knew right away that Gaylord was checking on his favorite ride and giving his blessing for what the park had become. 6 months after Gaylord Jr. died, a picture was taken of the school bus, and apparently his face was clearly visible in one of the windows. Jewel believed this meant he was still living on the bus and approved of how the park was being run by his younger brother. There are multiple memorials on the property for the Clay children who died there in 1783, and Conley Snidow, the founder of the Lake Shawnee Amusement Park. Conley actually put up the memorials for the Clay children in 1937. A headstone sits on the exact spot where Bartley and Tabitha Clay were buried after being brutally murdered. Chris White still owns and manages the property and offers paranormal tours of the abandoned amusement park. And there are also private tours by request. Photo history tours are offered year-round and are advertised as fun for all ages, but other attractions aren't for the faint of heart. Each October, guests flock to the park to participate in the Dark Carnival. The carnival is held from 8 p.m. to midnight. During the storytelling by campfire, guests hear first-hand accounts from people who actually visited the park when it was operational. Others talk about paranormal experiences they've had on the property. There's the haunt at Lake Nightmare. As an eerie fog settles over the lake, everyone is led on a tour of the property. They go through the haunted house, around the lake, and then through a haunted corn maze. When walking through the corn maze, guests never know what's coming around each corner, as volunteer actors pop up out of nowhere, and those who are deathly afraid of clowns don't make it very far. I don't know what's more terrifying than seeing a clown in a corn maze. That gives me flashbacks to my childhood, for sure. And you're absolutely terrified of clowns too, aren't
Yeah.
you? Yeah.
You and I both were.
Really fucking scared. Yeah, don't fuck with clowns.
And that was even before we seen the movie It. I mean, just clowns in general are just
a clown in general. I've never understood how like kids find clowns entertaining.
No.
Like, even when we went to like the damn circus and saw clowns, I'd be like, all those guys are freaks. Like
they do look like freaks.
Like God,
Yeah.
Like what is so funny or like
I don't get
entertaining about looking at somebody with makeup on? Like it's just weird.
It is.
To me, honestly,
it really is.
I mean, no offense to clowns,
no,
but like
no,
it's just I don't get it.
just for you and I personally, yeah, it always scared us. So
Yeah, but the truly terrifying part is experiencing something paranormal at Lake Shawnee, which is much more common after the sun goes down. In fact, everyone who participates is required to sign a waiver of liability agreement, acknowledging that the tour is potentially dangerous and might lead to property damage, injury, or even death. And those who are brave enough can even camp out in the park. As paranormal activity picks up after midnight, and after 2 a.m, some people can't stand it anymore. Many who sign up don't even make it through the night and flee the property long before sunrise. Sounds like honestly a really fucking cool place to visit.
yeah, seems like a great opportunity to catch some legitimate evidence.
Yeah, and honestly, I 100% believe that this place is haunted. I mean, it's very clear from the history that there's obviously a lot of residual energy left over there, and definitely makes for a hotspot of paranormal activity for sure.
Just the only risk is you never know if these things can follow you home.
What you're dealing with.
Yeah,
exactly.
Kind of like going back to what we were.
I mean, what happens if you do something and you get cursed or something?
Yeah.
And then, or something attaches to you, or.
And even like with your example, even just grandfather's clothes at one place.
Yeah.
Followed you here to this house even after moving. So just something that simple too.
Definitely don't take a souvenir home from this place.
Yeah.
I wouldn't take a single thing from. I'm sure people do take stuff from here, and like
I could see it.
Experiences people have after taking. I mean, just
there's got to be a lot of clutter that people find, and
yeah.
So
seriously, it's a interesting one for sure. I feel like it's not one of the more well known spots that at least I've heard of before. But
yeah, same.
But Lake Shawnee Amusement Park, man. Sounds like honestly a paranormal investigator's like paradise.
Paranormal paradise. Yeah.
Paranormal paradise for sure. But you will have to let us know what you think about the Lake Shawnee Amusement Park. Maybe you've been there. Maybe you've had your own experiences. We'd love to hear it. But that concludes this episode of the Lights Out podcast. Hopefully you found this episode spooky and interesting. I know we did. Also, make sure you're subscribed to Lights Out on Apple Podcasts and YouTube. We'd really appreciate it. It does really help us out, as well as following us on Spotify. But with that being said, we'll see you guys next week. Until then, lights out, everybody.